If you are a grade 10 IT student, this video is going to tell you about your practical assessment task. This might be the first time that you're doing a PAT, but in certain subjects like IT and CAT and drama and music, you are required to do a PAT, which is a practical assessment task which is designed to show off all the skills you've learned this year. So this is the grade 10 PAT that is released in 2024, and we're just going to go through it. I'm just give you some tips and advice on how you approach this PAT. So let's get into it. So this is the document that you've probably been given by your teacher, and we're going to go through it bit by bit. So first of all, basically the PAT is a way of showing off all your skills, and there are 10 main tasks that we're going to go through. So the first 5 tasks are going to relate to the requirements and design. That's going to be in a document format. So we're going to create a document. In the old PATs, we used to call this phase 1. And then the second phase is when you actually take the research and the design that you did from your phase 1 and you implement it in a Delphi program. And then you have some documentation at the end as well. So that's going to be the basic structure of your PAT. So there are some due dates. They say that your task 1 to 5, or the old phase 1, should be done by the end of term 3, and the rest of the tasks should be done before your exams in term 4. So as you can see, they've broken tasks in groups of the first 5 and the last 5. So you can see that the first one is out of 40 and the second one is out of 40, and then there's a general overview or impression of everything for 20 marks. So it really uses as a guide to how much time you should be spending on each of those tasks. So as you can see, your IPO table is very valuable over here, and your actual development of the code is very valuable in this part. So make sure that you are getting as much of those marks as possible. So this is a compulsory project. It's not something you can leave out. And you need to develop the habits now of what's going to help you with your PATs in grade 11 and grade 12. If you develop bad habits of not doing all of the PAT or not putting as much effort into it, that's going to seep into your other years, and that's going to negatively affect your mark as you go on into other grades. So this tends to count about 25% of your final mark. So it's really worth investing a lot of time and resources into it. Plus, if you are trying to revise for your final exams, this is a great way to consolidate and practice some of those skills before your final exams. So let's talk about what the topic is for the 2024 PAT. And here you can see the topic is the universe, and they're talking about space, time, matter, and energy. And you are to design and develop a program on the aspect of the universe, anything to do with the universe. The project allows you to explore the universe using Delphi, using good programming principles. You need to make use of all variable types, all types of components that you've learned, at least 2 forms or page controls, which we'll talk about, and some data validation, error messages can be used. There's the basic gist. So they give you some examples, like a solar system explore app where you can develop an app for exploring the planets, or some information about the different planets and the moons and celestial bodies, a tool that can analyze astronomy to identify patterns and gain insights, a virtual observatory for amateur astronomers, building a platform where you can view observations, an exoplanet detection simulator. It's quite complicated what they're asking for you. You don't get too overwhelmed by how complicated the actual topic is. If you want to keep it simple, you can just do something like a nice little way to explore the different things in our current solar system. That's probably going to be the easiest. As long as you are showing off all your skills, that's going to be what's most important. So they've got some more ideas over here, like space mission, a planner, maybe a simulation game that you want to do, or space weather monitoring. So there are lots of examples that you can read through here, and they give you some nice resources where you can go to get some interactive videos and some ideas and research on the particular topic of what you want to put into your PAT. So your first step is to try get an idea of what you want your program to look like, or what it's going to do, what it's going to be. So really look at these topics, get some ideas. You could probably go outside of this list of options. It says that you're not limited to them. So if you can think of another idea, that's great, as long as it fits in the universe realm of the theme. You're going to need to do some sort of research just to get some ideas. Maybe even go look at other programs that teach you about space, about the different planets, to give you some ideas of what you want to do. Maybe you want to do a quiz program where it's going to quiz you on information about the universe, about the planets and so on. There are lots of different options available to you. So really have a look at those resources, and they give you some nice pictures and infographics here as well to help. They talk about, please don't get other people to do your work. You need to acknowledge if you've got work from somewhere else. For example, if you find some great code that you implemented into your program, you need to acknowledge where you got that from. You can do that for a little bit. You can't do your whole project just with using code from other places. You need to do most of the code yourself, but make sure that you are acknowledging those where you get from somewhere else. And let's talk about the requirements. So first of all, the main things that this pattern must have, it must have 2 tab sheets or forms, which I'll give you a little tip on that when we get to it later. And it must have good HCI design, meaning the buttons and everything must be laid out professionally and must look like a nice program. And they've got optional data structures, which is outside the curriculum. They talk about dynamic objects, arrays, and text files, encouraging you to use some of these. I would strongly suggest text files. I do have videos on text files that you can watch, and then you can try implement that into your PAT. So go check out my videos on text files. I think that's going to be the easiest one to put into your PAT. Task 0 is a discussion. Your teacher might have a discussion with you about the research, about the scope and the limitations. That's more of something that you will do in class. But let's get stuck into task 1. Now, what they've also done is they've given us, they say, yeah, there's a template that's been provided. So I've got the template over here. So they've provided this template as well, where you can see they've got the little task headings over there, and they've given you space to do the actual task. So the first task is you must define the task. Basically, you're going to give a little bit of a paragraph on each of these 3 things. You can talk about what the task is that you've chosen, the solution that solves the task, and a brief description. So I like to break it down like this. So if we come here to the task, this is where you're going to put the paragraph over here. So I like to break it out into 3 types of paragraphs. The first one is, what is the problem that your program will solve? So you need to almost make up a problem. Say there's no program that teaches us about the universe, and there's nothing currently at the grade 10 level or something like that. You describe in a paragraph what the problem is. Then you write a paragraph explaining how you want to create a program that will solve this problem. So in other words, I think we need a program that's going to allow users to quiz themselves on things in the universe. I'm going to use a quiz example as my example throughout this, but obviously you adjust it to whatever scenario you're going to use. We want to create a program that allows students to be able to quiz themselves on the universe, and if they can't quiz themselves, they must be able to learn about the different aspects of it. There must be diagrams that explain the different planets and some stats on the planets, so you can do that type of thing. So you explain how your program will solve the problem that you've just described in the paragraph before. And then the third paragraph, they talk about the scope. Provide a brief description of the scope. In other words, what are the things that your program's going to do? So here was a brief overview of your program. Here's where you're going to go into detail. The program is going to allow my user to select an option of whether they want to learn or play a game or like a quiz. When they learn, they're going to be able to pick which planet they want to pick, and then that will present information about that planet and statistics on that planet. They can click on different buttons to learn more about that planet. When they go back to the quiz option, they can then go and do a quiz on that particular planet. So you break down every single little task that that program wants to do. Obviously, you might have to come back and tweak it a little bit as you get more ideas of how it's going to work, but that's what I would do for this user requirements. A paragraph on what the problem is, so make up a problem, explain how your program will solve that problem, and then the last one is writing down all the tasks that your program will do in a paragraph format. They'll ask you about user stories. So we want to create a user story. They give us a little bit of example over here. We've got what we call actors or users, and then we've got what they are going to do, their goal, and then why they want to do it. So they give us an example over here. As an astronomer enthusiast, I want to view detailed information about Mars so that I can learn more about the red planet. So they give us some ideas of some possible nouns and some verbs that we can use so we can see who the people are. So you need to think about who your target audience is. So we want to have 2 user stories from 2 different types of users. So they give you some examples over here. As a student interested in astronomy, I want to learn more about the planet so that I can expand my knowledge on the topic. So you need 2 of those user stories, and you're going to place them in this part over here. As a what, I would like to do this, and they've actually given you the breakdown where you can specify the 3 different sections, and as you can see, there's place for 2 of them. Your acceptance test, you need a total of 4 acceptance tests for the 2 user stories. So how do we know that the program is doing what it's supposed to do? So that's how we're going to accept that the program is working. So for your 2 user stories, you're going to write an acceptance test. The system shall do this, the system shall do this. So that's what you can do as well. You can complete those sentences. How will you know when the user story has been completed? So basically, how do we know when that has been accomplished? Well, that is when the user knows how to answer questions and they can see their feedback about how many questions they got right. Something along those lines. So look at the acceptance test. They do give some examples over there, but use that to guide you. So you need at least 4 of these. So look at your user stories and go, how will I know when this has been achieved? And then you say the system shall do this. And that's how you know you've achieved one of those user stories. So try to do 2 for each one to try to get your 4. So that's where you'll place your user stories. The navigation and flow. Now you've only got 2 screens, so they've actually just showing you there's 2 screens, so you can then show the navigation and flow. If you've got more, you can maybe make more blocks in that, but basically you are going to say this is the one screen and it's going to flow from this screen to this screen, and if your screen goes back, then you can go back. So maybe this will be your menu screen and this will go to your quiz screen, and maybe your quiz screen goes to another screen if you've got a third one. So then you can always go and make a copy of this and paste it, and now you've got another one if you need it. So think about what you need: at least 2 screens. So you're just writing down, like you draw arrows saying this screen will go to that. So label the screen, this is my menu screen. So it's basically going to be like an arrow going from there to there, and if you want to go back, then the arrow must be able to go both ways. Then your actual screen design. This is where you're going to actually design your screens. Now they give you this little template where you can actually go and design it over here. You can draw in if you want. This is going to take a lot of time. What I would strongly suggest is that you actually design this in Delphi, and then you can make a screenshot. To make a screenshot, you go Windows Shift S, and then you can drag your mouse over the screen of Delphi, and then you can paste it over here, and then using this as your list, you can actually draw arrows where this points to the form, this points to whatever. If you don't have all of them, that's fine. Just the ones that you do have point to the different components so that they can see what components are there. So I would design your screen in Delphi first, and then paste it over here, and then put lines to everything. So this is where that is, this is where that is, and so on. Because not only will you then save time when you are doing the other phase, when you are implementing your program, because you've already created your screen. So I would strongly suggest that you design your screens in Delphi first. Remember, you need 2 screens, one over there and one over there. And make sure you follow good screen design. Keep your colors nice and consistent. Keep your buttons all the same size, all lined up underneath each other or next to each other. Make sure that they're all looking nice and professional. So there they give you some ideas of things that you should take into consideration when designing a good graphical user interface. And then you need a data dictionary. Now 4B is not listed here, so that's the one little thing I want you to take note of. There is no 4B. So what I'm going to do is underneath the screenshot over here, I'm just going to go and put a new page here, and I'm pasting the heading. I'm going to put 4B here. So let's change that to data dictionary. So over here, we're going to list our variables and components. It's at least 3 data types, local and global variables, naming conventions, and that. So what I would do over here, so we'll go and say our variables first. So I'm going to put in a table for what the variable's for, what type of variable it is, what its name is, and if it's local or global. And so what you're going to do for your variables is say maybe there's a variable that needs to, for your name. So you're going to be the user's name is going to be in a string, and it's going to be S username, that's my variable name, and it's going to be a global variable that we use throughout the program. So then you go through your variables like that. Maybe you need a variable to keep track of the user's score, and that's going to be an integer, and that'll be I score, and that'll also be a global variable. So those are things that you can do. So make your variables. Then you need your components. So what the component's used for, what type of component it is, and what its name is. So we only need 3 things for that. So we could say, for example, to enter the user's name, and that'll be edit box, which we'll call edt user. And then on the next one, we want to display the user's score, which will be displayed in a label, and that'll be LBL score, and so on. So you can go and list through some of your components that you're going to have over there. You can tie in a lot to what you've got over here. Just mention them over here. As you add components, you can list them over here. What's good about this is it's going to teach you to start naming your variables and your components early, because there's lots of marks for making sure that they are named correctly. You don't want to lose those marks. Then they talk about the other data structure. So if we get time to get to there, so we can say other data structure. What you can do here is you can talk about what you use. For example, why you use a text file, what did you use it for, and describe that process. So there they talk about explain where the text file was used in the program to add value. So you're basically justifying why you're using a text file. Again, it's very difficult to understand why you would use one if you don't know text files. So go watch my videos. You can see, maybe you get some examples for that. And then we move on to the biggest part of the phase 1, which is this input, process, output. So they want you to specify what is coming into the screen, what process is coming out of it. So you need to do this IPO screen. I'm not a big fan of how this layout is, because they ask you for quite a bit over here. So I'm going to change it slightly. So first of all, our input, I'm going to actually break it down into its own table. So over here, we're going to do our input over here. They want the format, the data types, the source of input, the source of output, validation of input, and error checking mechanisms. So I'm actually going to put the format, data type, source, and input and error checking into one here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'm going to create a table of 5 things. And this all is going to be the input. So we can merge the first one and say this is my input. So we're going to have data that's going into that particular one. We're going to have the format, the data type. I'm going to put the validation and the error check in. And I'm also going to put the source over here. So they did ask for source. So the source means where you're getting the data from. Where's the input coming from? So most of your input will probably come from either the keyboard, the mouse, or like a text file or somewhere else. If we have a screen where the user has to put in their username, we're going to say the username is coming from the keyboard. The format, it'll be text because there's no particular format to it. So we'll just say it's text. The data type would be a string. This is very similar to our data dictionary that we had above. Validation. So we must check that it's not blank because we don't want it to be left empty. And that might be the only check. And then we might say, please enter in a username. That might be the error message that we display. Other types of input that we might need is the answer for the quiz. And maybe they're going to use a mouse to click on options there. So we'll say it's a mouse. There's not applicable for that. Once they click on an option, we want to tick what option it is. So it'll be a string option, or actually it might be a character. Maybe it's a multiple choice test. So then maybe we want it to be a char that they are going to get the value. If that's the case, then we're actually going to say, well, the format of the input is going to be character. And just to be specific, I'm going to say it's coming from a radio group, just so that I know what it's doing. So they're going to pick one of the options in the radio group. Validation, check that an option was selected, because they can't leave it blank. And then we can say, please select an option. Maybe they typed in an answer. So they could say answer for quiz, and it's multiple choice, and they use the keyboard for that. Then you can say that's also going to be a character, and we're also going to use a char for that, and it must be an A, B, or C. So maybe that's the format. The format must be character and A, B, C, or D as my options. And validation, check that input is either A to D, for example. And then please select an option from A, B, C, or D. So you can specify that. So you can go through your inputs like that, specifying them. So that's going to be my input. Then your processing is very similar to what they've got. They want us to provide algorithms formulas to show the processing minimum of 2 algorithms. So what I would do with the processing, I would divide the processing into a table of 2. And so this is the processing, and this will be the what, and this will be processing, and this will be the how. So this is where you specify what is being processed. So we check in that the answer is correct for the quiz, and then over here you will actually give the algorithm of how you're going to do it. So you write like either pseudocode or like practice code of what it's going to be. You can write the if statements, for example. You can say if S input is equal to S correct answer, then, and you can do your code over here of how that's actually going to be done. So you can list what process is going to be done, and this is how you're going to do it. And then with the output, I would go and put in a table of 3, and that's going to be the output. This will be the component that is doing the output and the format of it. So for example, maybe you want to display the score of the quiz, and you can display it in a label, and the format will just be a number out of 10, for example. So you can specify the format on that. So a lot of this is very dependent on what your program is going to be doing. Obviously, I'm just making up stuff at the moment just for like a type of quiz thing, but this is just to give you an idea. So if you do that, I think you can actually scrap that table and then use this to make sure that you get all the marks. The reason why I prefer this is because it's laid out in a way that I make sure that I don't leave anything out, because the other way you were going to squish things in and you might forget something. So this way you might be able to get everything out there. So you can make it look a little bit pretty, maybe put some headings in, but that's what I would do for the IPO table. Now, before we move on, let's just go look at the rubric of what marks they want. So here's the rubric, which is further down in that document. You really need to go through it before you hand in your phase 1, those first 5 tasks, and make sure that you've got everything. So there they ask you about what is listed. So make sure that you've got everything, that you've got your topic clearly stated. That's just a once-off, and then your 3 paragraphs. If you do those 3 paragraphs, guess what? You're going to get all those marks if you've explained it well. Your user story, they want you to have the who, what, why, and they say at least 2 different types of users. So you need at least 2 user stories that are coming from 2 types of users. Think of 2 different types of people that are going to use your program. Acceptance test, you need at least 4 of them. If you've got all 4 done well, you're going to get 4 marks. If you've done 4 sort of okay, you're going to at least get 3. So make sure that you've at least got 4. The navigation between screens, they just want to see a representation of the design and flow of the events. You can speak to your teacher about how they're going to assess that, because it's very difficult with 2 screens to really show the flow. But if you have more steps, maybe even list in what is going to be done on those screens. So what I would do is I would say what the screen is, and then maybe list what's going to happen on that screen. Maybe that'll give it more scope for you to get all those marks. Okay, so show the sequence of events and the flow of the events and so on. Then your screen design, that's where you've got your 2 screens that you showed off using Delphi to design them. Make sure that you made use of good components, that they clearly mark navigation, that it's friendly. Make sure that you hit that. And then your data dictionary, make sure that you've planned for a variety of components, a variety of data types. If you fill in this table well, I'm pretty sure you'll get all those marks for that. The IPO, here's where the big marks are. So you need an interface, at least 2 interfaces. So what you need to do is you need to do this table for both screens. So have the one screen, so specify what the screen is. So look at that screen and use that to guide you what's going into that screen, what are the different information, what processing being done on the screen, and what output. Then copy and paste this again and do this for the second screen. What's going into that screen, what processing being done on that screen, and what output is being done. So they want at least 3 overall data types. So as long as you got 3 over both screens. So it doesn't matter if you got a string and an integer in one and a character in another, that counts as 3 over the 2. Then the validations at 3 different data types validated, 3 inputs validated. So there they say what types of validation you must be done. So then that's going to affect what you have over here, making sure that you've got good error messages and that you are specifying what the error checking is. So that should actually be error messages, not error checking. That's the error messages. And this is what validation error checking is being done to get that message. So make sure that you follow those instructions. Then the data process, at least 2 processes and describe 2 algorithms. So you need to have listed at least 2. So maybe one on the screen and one on the other with example of the code for that. So the output for the 2 interfaces, so for both screens, what is being displayed. So the output is anything that is being shown to the user, whether it's a label displaying a score, that's what you want to list over here, the score for their quiz. If you're teaching the learner about information, like a picture, an image would be output because you're showing them a picture of the planet, a text box that has information about the planet. Those would be things that are being displayed to the user. So you can specify what it is, what component you're using for it, and what's the format for it. And that will get you all the marks for the phase 1. So to hand in, they ask you to hand in all those annexes. We've just showed you them over here. So you're handing this document with everything in it. Now let's look at the phase 2, which is task 6 to 10. You create your 2 screens, which you've probably already done, hopefully, by using your graphical user interface earlier. And if you use good HCI principles, you've technically done tasks 6 and 7 and saved time. Then you develop your code, making sure that you make use of everything that they ask here. Maybe add a text file if you can. Make sure that you are using good programming techniques, that you are naming things correctly. Test your program, making sure that you test that it validates all the information. Maybe let someone else to go through your code and see if there are any mistakes with it, but get someone to test it. Check every aspect of the program. Now for the documentation, you need to, first of all, you write notes in your code to say what each thing is doing. So whenever you write a section of code, a type of variable, explain what the variable's for, explain what the code's been done. That's going to help you if you need to explain your code. And then you can design a little help file to tell someone how to use the program. So a little Word document where you have a screen and explain what's happened on the screen and how it's used. It doesn't have to be very long, but something that can be used as documentation to show that whoever uses your program how it's going to be used. So you're going to hand in your program, your documentation, which is your help file, and then the 2 declarations, which is at the bottom here. So there's your declaration. You can print this out and then sign it and say where you got help from. And then there you can say, yes, this is definitely my work, and you sign it. So you attach this as well to your project. That's the end there. Your teacher will talk to you about an interview where they interview about the project. And the key thing here is that they're going to ask you questions about your code. Guess what? Those notes that you wrote in your code are going to help you there. So let's look at the rubric. They're giving you marks for a variety of components, that everything's consistent, that the variables have different types and good names and component names, that you got different types of input, that you use built-in functions, nested ifs, in operator loops. Make sure that you're using as much of that as possible, that you're using all the things you learned in school, as well as stuff like, for example, text files. There's where you get your text file marks, and that you format everything correctly. And then when you test it, they'll see that your program works even if you put in the wrong information, and then the error messages will pop up and say, hey, this is a mistake. So that's where you'll get the marks for the data validation. And then you test it for good data, you test for extreme data. So what happens if they put in a number instead of a letter for the multiple choice quiz? How do you handle that? Does the program crash? If it does, then that's a problem. You want to make sure that you catch those errors, and then your comments and notes. And then at the end, you got your overall impression. Was it how complete it is? Is it a professional product? Your attitude, your ability to explain the code. So there's what you can do for your PAT. So the last thing I want to show you is if you're designing your program, if you want to use multiple screens, what you can use is what's called a page control. So I'm going to type in here page control. And that's the T, page control. I'm going to click on it. I'm going to put it on my screen and make it nice and big. And then you can right click on it and say new page, and it makes a little tab, and you can right click and pick a new page again. And so this way you can create multiple screens. So you can go, that can be screen 1, that can be screen 2. When you click on the page control, we do have a video on page controls that can explain to you exactly how to use it, but this is what I could use for my page control. And then you're going to put your button on one screen. When you go to the other screen, you can't see that button because it's on the first screen. Just remember, as I said, when you click on your buttons, make sure that you name them correctly, but put // and explain what the button is doing. By adding all this green, you'll be able to get marks for the comments in your code, but also to be able to explain the code if you ever get quizzed on it in an interview. So make sure that you've got lots of green explaining all your code. So hopefully it'll give you a little bit of an idea. Your teacher will give you more advice. We do have videos on the PAT. Some of it's for matric and grade 11 level, but some of it is going to be very useful for you as well. So go check out those videos. We've got videos for phase 1, which can help you with your IPO table and things like that. So go check them out. Maybe they can give you some ideas, and go check out those text file videos as well. That can also help you as the extra thing that you're doing. So good luck, grade 10s. I know this is quite a daunting task, but remember, this is the big thing. You are using this to show off all your skills. So make sure that everything you've learned in Delphi this year in IT, use it in some way in the PAT. And the key thing to that is finding a nice topic of what you're going to do your project on. So think of that universe theme, find something that relates to you that you think you can do, and go out and do it. Good luck, grade 10s. Remember, for more videos, go to our YouTube channel, click on that subscribe button, and get informed whenever we post new videos that can help you. And check out our playlist for more options there as well. And remember to follow us on TikTok at Mr. Long Education. And remember, don't do it the long way, do it the Mr. Long way.